Ian Fleming failed the Foreign Office exam to become a diplomat. This was a serious setback, more so than his wipeout at Eton and Sandhurst. His mother was hysterical. To Evelyn Fleming, failure was not just disappointing, it was indecent. Worse, it had a name. That woman, whom she never considered remotely suitable, was blamed for distracting her son from studying. Then came her ultimatum: the engagement or his inheritance. For most, this might have provoked a period of soul-searching. Ian, meanwhile, was juggling several romantic entanglements already, including one with a bubble girl named Storm. What he needed was not another girlfriend. He needed cash. Without hesitation, his mother marched him toward Plan B. She insisted he write to a family friend, Sir Roderick Jones, chairman of Reuters news agency, requesting an interview. A week later, Fleming found himself walking along the Thames toward Reuters headquarters with zero journalistic experience and every intention of concealing the fact. His first interview was with Jones himself. Like any self-respecting applicant, Ian expanded the truth where necessary. Second interview was conducted by Reuters news editor, Bernard Rickerson. His monocle, a legacy of being gassed in the First World War, attracted its share of curious stares. Rickerson never appeared to mind. If anything, it seemed to do half the interviewing for him. Fleming, armed with his effortless charm, polished accent, and encyclopedic confidence, sailed through. The Reuters executives were impressed. He lacked experience, certainly, but he possessed something harder to teach: presence, sophistication, the unmistakable air of a man who looked as though he belonged in important places. Reuters offered him a 1-month trial without pay. Ian accepted. Jones stamped his application with his trademark red C for chairman. To a young man in his 20s, few professions were more glamorous than journalism. Reporters occupied a place somewhere between explorer and celebrity. At Reuters, there was only one standard. Your copy had to be tight, right, fast, and accurate. Anything less was fatal. Ian's copy was read and discussed in the highest circles. He found himself ringside at history's most interesting moments. He covered sports, the monarchy, and celebrities.
Cruising in the Mediterranean with Mr. Onassis, the Greek shipping magnate. She is leaving for New York. What a place to seek solitude.
Soon he was dispatched to Munich for his first overseas assignment, covering the international Alpine trials. Part reporter, part navigator. He hurtled through mountain passes, negotiated hairpin bends above sheer drops, and ended his days at the Grand Hotel in St. Moritz.
Exhibitions of skating to watch, cocktails to drink, and skating waiters or waiting skaters to keep the cocktails going.
Fast cars, dangerous roads, luxury hotels, exotic locales, The ingredients of James Bond were assembling themselves. Each evening, he hammered stories into his royal portable typewriter, filing dispatches.
So I had a go at the diplomatic and learnt my languages for it, and I passed in 7th, but there were only 5 vacancies, and so I decided not to have another go, but to go straight in and start earning some money. So I joined Reuters, which is the nearest thing to the diplomatic in a way, because I could use my languages, German and French and Russian. And I had a wonderful time in Reuters, because I learnt there the sort of good, straightforward, or at any rate, straightforward writing style that everybody wants to have if they're going to write books.
The work suited him perfectly, and so did society. At Sir Roderick Jones's annual dance, Fleming became one of the most talked about young men in London. Writers began slipping versions of him into their novels. He collected literary cameos. He was Hugo Dropmore in Scenes from a Bourgeois Life, Max von Elm in Devil's Due, Ian Crawley in Spears Against Us. Diplomat Harold Nicholson immortalized him in Public Faces. At 25, he was the glossiest, wittiest, most charming young man in England. Armed with enough conversational ammunition to dominate any dinner table. He seemed to know everything about everything.
Have a little more of this rather disappointing brandy. Well, what's the matter with it?
I'd say it was a 30-year-old fiend who differently played it, sir.
With an overdose of bon bois.
Sir Roderick Jones later recalled, "I never spent a dull moment in his company." By 33, Reuters sent him back to Germany to cover Adolf Hitler's final election campaign speeches and monitor German political broadcasts. Europe was changing. The future was beginning to look dangerous. And Ian Fleming was just getting started. Then came Moscow. In 33, one of the most sensational stories in Europe. The trial of 6 British engineers accused by the Soviet government of espionage and sabotage. The case had ignited a diplomatic firestorm. Britain was outraged. Moscow was defiant. Newspapers across Europe were hungry for every scrap of information. Reuters selected the 25-year-old Fleming to cover the trial in Moscow. For a young reporter, it was the assignment of a lifetime. Before the war, the most exciting train in Europe was the Nord Express. It was left over from the Tsars. The journey itself felt like a passage into another world. His brother Peter, who had visited Moscow 2 years earlier, offered little encouragement. It was not, perhaps, the travel advice found in guidebooks. Armed with little more than a typewriter, traveler's checks, a sharp suit, and a novel, Ian Fleming set off for Moscow. The first leg of the trip was a flight from the Croatian Aerodrome to Berlin, which was an adventure in itself.
They're designed to carry 40 passengers in the comfort for which Imperial Airways have always been famous. The size can be best judged by comparisons such as this.
It was in Berlin where he boarded the Nord Express for a first-class sleeper across the Prussian plains. It wasn't until late afternoon that he passed the red and white posts, marking the border between Poland and Russia. He then boarded the Moscow Express. He rode in a Victorian-era railway carriage that seemed to belong to a vanished century. The further east he traveled, the more Europe appeared to fade behind him. Fleming arrived in Moscow dressed in a natty Glen plaid suit, inspired by his literary hero, Evelyn Waugh, who had made foreign correspondence seem like high adventure. Against Moscow's backdrop of gray skies and grim buildings, Russia, he thought, seemed as depressing as a pauper's funeral. An Ivy League Reuters colleague met him at the station. Together they sped through the Soviet capital toward the National Hotel. Fleming looked down on his extravagant, loud suit and sheepishly admitted, "I thought I could get away with it here." The irony is delicious. The very pattern Fleming felt was too conspicuous for Moscow would later become immortal. Years afterward, he introduced the same Glen plaid style to the Bond films, where it was tailored for Sean Connery and called the Goldfinger suit. It became one of the most iconic suits in cinema history. Before leaving London, his editor had given him simple instructions. Get the story first. Everything depends on it. That evening, Fleming joined the press corps in the hotel bar. He met the men he would be competing against, battle-hardened foreign correspondents from the world's largest newspapers and wire services. They were veterans. Fleming was a newcomer. But if there was one thing Ian Fleming never lacked, it was confidence. The challenge was that reliable information was scarce. Most reporters responded with caution. Fleming responded with imagination. When hard facts dried up, his dispatches became rich with atmosphere, suspense, and looming menace. In another report, he built anticipation around the approaching verdict. His editor occasionally wondered whether some of those details were supported by evidence. It was not a response likely to appear in a Reuters style guide. Yet his editors tolerated it, because beneath the flourish was genuine talent. Fleming possessed a rare instinct for drama. He understood that readers also wanted tension, atmosphere, and the feeling of being present when history happened. Under pressure, he could transform uncertainty into compelling copy. The future creator of James Bond had not yet written a novel. But in Moscow, he was learning how to make an audience turn the page. As the trial crawled toward its verdict, the atmosphere inside the press room became unbearable. Days of rumor, speculation, and waiting had stretched every correspondent's nerves to the breaking point. Ian organized a game of craps. Soon reporters from rival newspapers were crowded around the floor shouting at dice, arguing over odds. Fleming laughed, rolled the dice, and played the genial host. What his rivals didn't know was that there was a second game underway. Behind the scenes, He was plotting to beat every one of them to the verdict. After a brief consultation with his old friend, Ivor Bryce, Fleming arranged for the telephone cords of competing journalists to be cut. At the same time, he recruited a young boy for a more elegant piece of tradecraft. The moment the verdict was announced, the boy would receive the news inside the courthouse and drop a written message from a window to a colleague waiting below in a car. The colleague would then race the dispatch to Reuters. Simple, ingenious, almost certainly against several regulations. Most importantly, it was supposed to work. As the courtroom filled, the tension mounted. Fleming could barely contain his excitement. The verdict finally arrived. Guilty. The message was delivered. The operation sprang into action. Reuters moved the story, and the story exploded across Europe. In London, the Foreign Secretary received Fleming's cable and immediately relayed its contents to Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald, who was aboard a ship crossing the Atlantic to meet President Roosevelt. Within minutes, officials at Windsor Castle were being informed. Soon afterward, Britain authorized a ban on imported Soviet goods. The consequences were international. The story was huge. Fleming had every reason to celebrate. Then reality arrived in the form of a telegram. A Reuters messenger shoved it into his hands. Fleming stared at the message. Years later, Fleming would laugh at the absurdity of it all. He left Moscow with a cross and a signed letter from Stalin refusing his interview. Bryce called him a Debrouillard. Good man in a tight spot. Ian liked the idea of spies, and this was the next best thing to being one. Somewhere along the way, he had begun thinking like a spy. Ian Fleming's adventures in Moscow came to a temporary halt. But his story is just beginning. Back in London, a series of unexpected twists will set him on a path no one could have predicted. That's next time.